Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of The Ido Show. Thanks for joining me, and this is the closest you're ever going to get to winning an Emmy because we have Bill Oberst Jr., who has won an Emmy and can talk all about it and more. So, Bill, thanks so much for joining us here. I know it's been hard pinning down a time that works for both of us, so I appreciate you making the
The
effort.
Emmys are really fragile, Dan. They're notorious.
Are
Yeah,
they?
like where the chick's wrist holds up the world, they snap really frequently.
Welcome to The Ido Show, where we bring the insights, motivations, and stories behind great innovators, leaders, and community members to you. I'm Dan Weeks, your host, and every episode we aim to bring you casual and candid conversations about the failures, the wins, the losses, the lessons learned, and so much more. So please join me, and let's talk to this week's guest.
So before I ever came into contact with one, I actually broke one on location in
Wow.
LA, shooting a movie called A Haunting in Salem, where we were shooting at these guys' house, and they were producers. And so all their
Mm.
personal stuff was in one of the bedrooms, which I was using as the dressing room. So there was the Emmy. And I was like, "Ooh, cool. I've never seen one of those." Well, I picked it up and snap. So
Got an up close and
to
personal
this
look, yeah.
day, I do not know if they know that the Emmy snapped, because the art department helped me out and they glued it so imperceptibly that you could just not see. So yeah, somewhere there's somebody with an Emmy that they don't know has been broken, but they break all the time, which is a pretty good metaphor for like the fragility and transience of all of this Hollywood stuff. It Yeah, it's
Yeah.
all plastic and it all breaks really easily.
That's one reason I wanted to talk to you, Bill, because you and I go back like 15 years almost at this point. Because I think you have so much to talk about, and you've done so much in your career, but you had pretty humble beginnings, right? And I don't think you ever thought you would get to the point where you're at now. So I'm curious, like one thing that stood out to me was you had won your Emmy for the Take This Lollipop, which was the thing back in 2011 ish,
Yeah.
I think. And so you had kind of seen that your career taking off, and you were doing these bigger projects. And so you and I met when I asked you to be one of our judges for an international film festival, the celebrity judging panel. And the thing that struck me was you and I were talking about, like, well, Bill, do I need to get you a hotel? Where do you want to stay? All the stuff you're used to dealing with. And I remember very clearly what you said of just get a bunch of bananas and some frozen spoons. And that was like, and then you slept on my couch for 3 days. I think humility is kind of the one word that stands out to me, and something you've stayed in touch with over the years. So, like, what is your story? How did you get your start? And, what has that journey been? Just in a quick
Well,
nutshell.
Dan, don't be a bitch. That gets you a lot of work. It gets you a lot of
Yeah.
work in any industry, but especially in this one, because by the time people are, if they're doing a film project, stage project, they put in a lot of work. Maybe they
Mm.
mortgage their house or borrowed money from people. And so now you're really like the last 10% of what happens before they actually start to do this thing they dreamed about. So
Mm.
if you're a drama queen, a lot of times, unless you're a super, super name, they're just like, you know what? No, I would just rather
Yeah.
go with somebody that I know will be easy. So yeah, that's me. I always want to be the guy that's easy, and that's always.
Mm.
I almost feel bad taking money from people. I feel bad with like any extras, like, oh, we'll put you up in business class. I'm like, no, yeah, it's okay. It's all right. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I, I don't know if it's humility, but I've never felt, I know how hard people work just to get a production going. And I don't want to come
Right.
in at that last minute and take advantage of them in any way. I mean, I want to be paid, of course, because this is what I do, but I don't want to be the one who asks for anything other than bananas.
Yeah, and frozen spoons. And actually, I'm the queen of, or queen, king of, you said drama queen, and it's in my head, but the king of the baggy eyes now that I have a kid and, wake up early to do these. And so the frozen spoon trick works really well. So thank you for that. I do want to talk about adversary, and we'll circle back to that. But I think one thing that's kept you grounded has been your solo projects. So the one man shows, which is something that you're pretty well known for. That, and then if you Google creepy torso actor, at one point you were the number one result. And so but I think people know you though for being grounded and for not being a drama queen, right? And so how did you go from just, well, tell us a little bit about your roots, because I know your story, but viewers may not. So like, what got you started? Because you weren't always an actor.
No, I was a kid with bad acne, no interest in sports, a bookworm who made straight A's, and I was really overweight. All of those things when I was a boy. So you can imagine how popular I was in rural
Hmm.
South Carolina. Not
Yeah.
very. So just as a defense mechanism, my grandmother told me, she said, Billy, everybody gets a starter. God gives you a starter, something to start with. And she illustrated to me was there was a friendship cake that the people in her church would make. And one person would pass to another this little bit of yeasty stuff in a jar called starter. She said, God gives you a
Hmm.
starter, something you can do. And I was like, Mama, there's nothing I can do. But then one day at school when kids were pushing me around, I got an idea and I did an imitation of the principal who did our announcements, and they liked it. And they asked me the next day, hey, do that again. And I thought, aha, if you entertain people, they will not hit you. So my whole career has just been a cry to please don't hit me.
Gotcha. And has that changed? Because I think one thing that I read a comment on something. I think it was something you posted, but somebody said I'm 63 and this brought out the teenager in me, right? And like takes people back. So you've got this career with a lot of breath to it. Does that ever change like the core innate like Bill who's in there, or is it still the same kid who's now just matured a little bit?
There was a brief moment when I was doing a lot of projects like, God, I was doing maybe 10 to 12 projects a year for a couple of years. And after I
Mm.
did Criminal Minds, and I was getting on red carpets, like bigger red carpets, and I became kind of the drama queen who was antsy because I wasn't on big enough red carpets and because I wasn't bigger and
Mm.
checking every day my rating on IMDb. Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
it got really bad, and I had to have some humbling experiences, which I thank God for, to ground me. And I realized I'm not. I never was a celebrity, but I would not be a good celebrity because I thought this is not healthy for me. It's not healthy for the
Yeah.
people who are around me, and I don't want to do this. I just want to be an actor, and I'm sorry that acting never got conflated with celebrity. But
Mm.
so yeah, I got off the red carpets, and I really lost interest in that side of the business. Um, yeah, so I instantly felt like myself again. I think we all have the self that we
Yeah.
are when we were kids, and we retain that up until old age, as long as we're true to ourselves. Um, so yeah, that as long as I stay away from anything that smacks of importance, I'm okay. But if
And it's all artificial too, which it's funny because uh, this takes me back to when we were judging, or you the judges were judging, and I was the chauffeur. And so I remember we did this private screening of all the films that won, and the filmmaker who had the best product by far couldn't be bothered enough to show up or answer his phone for us to give him a cash prize. And I remember that reaction from the judges, that visceral like, come on, dude, like that literally this is what matters, right? We're trying to give you cash and you're over here stroking your ego with a different project or Instagram. And I remember that reaction, and that's like such a good example, I think, an iteration of what happens to people, right? Of what's real. It's paying your mortgage. It's, staying true to your faith or your moral compass, being there for your family and that sort of thing, not the likes and the follows and the shares. And so that always stuck out to me. And on that note, you're an actor and a man of God, which I think has kind of driven you as well, right?
Say that again. What'd you say?
Your faith has kind of carried you through a lot of your work.
Yeah, yeah. I never liked my face. Like everybody else. I was.
Oh, faith. Sorry, faith, as
Oh,
in
my
believing in a higher
faith.
power.
Yeah, there were times when I didn't like my faith, but yeah, it's carried me through, and my faith has changed, Dan.
Has it?
Over the years, you have. I think we all have the faith that we're taught, and that everybody, if you worship in some way together, the things that we all say together that we believe. But then personally, over the course of our lifetime, we develop our own beliefs. I I am a follower of Jesus, and I believe that there's a deep, deep mystery at the heart of that. And I don't believe it can be codified into structured creeds with rules and regulations and theologies. I think that it's better to leave it mysterious and be in love.
How do you view the world in its current state? Because this isn't a topic I thought we would be discussing, but since you mentioned that it's evolved and changed, I imagine that challenges perceptions and what you were taught, growing up where you did. Um, do you find that shifts and warps your perspective now, or are you pretty consistent and just see the world with its ebbs and flows as it's always been?
No, no, I do sense a change in the world. In fact, I'll show you a book that I'm reading for the third time, and I highly recommend it.
Mm. The Master and His
The
Emissary.
Master and
Okay.
His Emissary, Ian McGilchrist. It's a book about left brain, right brain, but not as you would or may have heard left brain, right brain described. The two hemispheres of the brain, they're not, the two hemispheres of the brain are not, they don't do different things, but they encourage you and enable you to be in the world in two different ways. The right hemisphere
Interesting.
wants to engage with whatever is other than ourselves and see it as organic and ever changing and new. So that if I'm with you, the right brain, the right hemisphere of the brain, which controls my left side, wants to engage with Dan as something brand new, even if I just saw you yesterday, because you're an
Mm.
organic thing. You may change. It wants to just be there with you. The left side of the brain,
Mm.
controlled by the right side of the body, the left side of the brain wants to categorize you and say, Dan, I know what you are. White male, certain age. I know I've put you in a box. I've structured you.
Mm.
That's why the left brain is the brain of language. So both things are needed in the world, because if we just engaged with everything as new, we'd never do anything. But what's
Yeah.
happened, the author of The Master and His Emissary says, is that we have now moved in our culture into such a left brain style that we no longer see one
Okay.
another, we no longer see the world, we don't engage with people or the planet as they really are and as it really are. Instead,
Mm.
we put things in categories, and we don't want to know anything beyond the categories. We represent them, like the left brain has sort of, it breaks things down into bits.
Mm.
So you are left wing, you are right wing, you are this, you are that, you are a category.
Yeah.
You're no longer,
And the interesting thing is, if you look at actual
yes,
numbers and statistics and voter registrations and that sort of thing, like I've been a registered independent my whole life, adult life, I should say, and I think that's true of the majority, right? Is we're all kind of like in this center and not on the fringe, but the fringe is where that shift to the left brain in society has taken us, and so that seems like the
it's
reality.
it's a great danger in human relations to think that you know everything about a person because you know one or two things. It's a tremendous
Mm,
danger and is growing more and more dangerous. We have to start seeing one another and really being with one another and understanding that things change and people change. So, to wrap up the little bit on my faith, what I believe that Jesus was doing, and I'm looking at a crucifix on the wall now, I think that what he was doing was showing us a new way to be human, which is actually
mm,
the way to be human. The way to be human that brings us peace and lets us be a part of this world as we were meant to is to be forgiving, to be kind, to be compassionate, to be loving. It is not to be cruel. It's not to
mm.
humiliate other people, to gain advantage. It's not to see every damn thing as a transaction. That's not the way to be human. That's the way to be miserable. And I think that's why we
Right.
are, as a culture right now, sick. And we keep
I
choosing
agree.
we
Yeah.
keep choosing things that are deadly for us. We keep reaching for the poison. So there.
There, and I think that is in line with something I was actually just reading too. That the thought of this like detoxification from cell phones and electronics, and somebody said their hot take is to turn off the internet for 1 day a week, and the outcry that brought just in a conversation was incredible to me because I think you hit the nail on the head. Is that we're falling into these categorical addictions to electronics, right? I mean, our brains weren't meant to have the entire internet and books and everything like right in front of us for a few $100. So that is one thing, and then I think just like you said, that overall shift is enabling more. But as an actor, you emulate people, right? So obviously, and it was Abe Lincoln versus zombies, right? Because I know there was an Abe Lincoln versus vampires around the same time, but you were the
Yeah.
zombies flavor, right? So obviously there it's based on Abe
Yes.
Lincoln, different subject matter, but you're very much a method actor in that you I mean clearly you read, right? You have the human anatomy behind you and you study, and that's your approach to all your roles. So as an actor, what are your insights into like becoming somebody else who's maybe existed or be living a legend from somebody else's
It's
mind?
you absorb them. Lincoln was a melancholy man. He was melancholy. Today we would say that he was sick and then he needed to be medicated because he would have
Mm,
periods where he just shut down and he just couldn't do anything and he would brood. And he was a very, very strange man who we would never elect or I think even respect today. So that's what I wanted to portray was how would that sort of a personality deal with zombies? And I think he would deal with it the same way that he dealt with the Confederates, quietly, resolutely, and giving it great, great thought before he spoke. So that's what I tried to bring about. I think it's easier for people in the past to play them because we have letters written by them, and we're not going to have that in the future, because we don't write letters anymore. And I don't know that text will be
right.
available to actors, but there's a great body of literature on Lincoln. One of the interesting things, he had a boyhood friend who went insane in some way. We don't know because there was no
Mm,
mental health diagnosis then. But the boy was to the point that his parents, and they were on the frontier, they don't have access to health care. They locked him in the
mm,
corn crib and chained him up there. And so he lived
yeah.
out there for a while. And Lincoln would go and see him and try to talk to him, and the boy would just be screaming and schizophrenic or something. I don't know. This made a
Mm.
huge impact on Lincoln, and he developed this sort of
Wow.
fatalistic view of humanity. He was deeply embedded in scriptures, particularly the Old Testament. He loved Shakespeare. He loved anything that had some fatalism to it. So, yeah, I love absorbing people like that are rich and not like us.
And they're like us too in many ways, though, in the sense that that one instance can have such a profound impact. And in the book that I'm publishing about me getting struck by lightning, I call it my lightning moment. Right? These snap moments that completely change your perspective. That then has a ripple through time. And so, in that sense, he's very much like all of us because we've experienced that to some extent, some more than others, but we've all been there in some, fashion. I'm curious, Bill, what is your favorite role that you've ever played, and or I should say, what's your favorite production that you've been part
Well,
of? Because you often have more than one role.
there are three that I'll give you. Two film and one stage. The stage was well. I'll give you two. I'll give you two stage and two film, more than you asked for. I toured as Mark
For sure.
Twain for a number of years, doing a variation of the show that the late Hal Holbrook did, and it was remarkable and wonderful to step into Twain's shoes. And it was when I began to realize how attention spans were changing and diminishing during the years that I did that. I
Mm. When was that? That was like 2015 ish, right?
no,
Somewhere
no,
around there,
no,
mid
much
2010s.
earlier than that. I played Twain for almost 20
Oh, really?
years. And
So the attention problem's been a persisting problem for at least the
oh,
last
yeah.
20 years.
Also, the second stage, I did a portrayal of Jesus of Nazareth. And what I wanted to
I
do was
remember.
to
Yeah.
recreate sort of his teaching presence live. So I did this at colleges and houses of worship. And I would just do the makeup and dress as a first century rabbi might have appeared. And then try to say with very natural inflections the words that he's reported to have said. Like, what would it be like to actually encounter that? And I love doing that. That was very meaningful. So on film, the two were Criminal Minds. And the reason that I really enjoyed that character is because the makeup artist, Christopher Allen Nelson, who did all of Tarantino's makeups for Kill Bill, he was a
Mm.
big Lon Chaney fan, and so was I. And so he helped me to create this sort of very sad, wounded character who was very dangerous too. So I really enjoyed doing that for
Mm.
Criminal Minds. And then there was a movie called The Retrieval. It's not a horror movie. It's a coming of age story set in the Civil War, and I played a bounty hunter. And it's one of the best films that I've ever done. And it moves people, and it has something to say to young people. So yeah, those are a few favorites.
In Criminal Minds, I get chills thinking about it, but I got chills seeing it the first time because it's one of those shows that like all my family and friends love. Right? I got hooked, and then one day I see you on there, and it's like, oh man, he was on my couch, right? Which is like this weird thing of I know you, I know you're not the character, but still seeing that dangerous character, and then being like, whoa, I have pictures with
And
Bill. It was this
I'll
cool,
tell you, Dan, this
yeah.
is it's an illustration how I got hired for that. It's an illustration of how things work in Hollywood. The director was Matthew Gray Gubler, who was actually in the show as Dr. Reed. And so when I got to you do, a series of auditions for a big one like that. When I got to the big audition, there was Matthew and like a whole table full of producers and whatnot. And so we did the audition, and he said to me afterwards, when I got the role, he said, I've tried to hire you three times before, but each
Hmm.
time you were vetoed by somebody at the table who said, I never heard of him, because that can kill you.
Interesting.
And I said, well, how did you
Yeah,
get me
yeah.
this time? And he said, well, we've got Adrienne Barbeau and Tobin Bell in both of those are names that people know. So I was able to get you. So that's the way that the hierarchy works. I lost a major television role shortly after that, which I went all the way to Disney to the producers for audition. Oh, I was certain that I had that role. The producers said, "Thank you
Hmm.
so much. We love what you've done." And then I didn't get it, and I found out what happened. It was the same thing.
Hmm.
At the final meeting where
Wow.
they present the names, someone at the table said, "I've never heard of him." And that was the kiss of death.
Wow. That's I had written a note here on my handy dandy little email printout from last night that I sense a sort of confliction being in the industry, in that you have maintained your moral compass after the revelation of having strayed a little bit, that you talked about. But how do you feel now? Like, are you conflicted from things like that happening and overlooking the amazing talent that's out there? And if so, how do you, or maybe not if so, but what are your thoughts also on, you know, being in the industry that is so superficial when you're clearly not?
And I hope that this is a result of my faith and the time that I spend in front of the cross. But I have gotten to the point now where I don't really give a damn about the hierarchy. I don't care about the awards, but the people interest me. So in whatever job
Mhm.
I have, I want to become really close to those people. I want to spend time talking to them as much as I can. I want to please them. I want to serve them. And as long as I concentrate on the people, it's good. And you end up making good new relationships. But you can't have a relationship with a hierarchy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not real, but people are real. And if you keep your focus on people, yeah, it's okay. I mean, nobody will know who I was 20 years after I die. Hell, maybe even 5 years. I don't know. Nobody will know. But I'm at peace with that because I'm alive now. And I no longer really care about a legacy. I just want to live now and be as good as I can to the people in my life. For my own, that's for my
Yeah.
own health too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's this concept that I think breaks people's brains of the sense of self, right? And that in a lot of ways you are your own universe. Like in school, when people say you're not the center of the universe, it's like your reality though is you living life. And the idea that that just turns off is, I think, why a lot of people spiral. So, like you just said, you're at peace with that idea that like all of us one day will not be remembered, just like people from 400 years ago largely weren't remembered, right? With the exception of a few, like you mentioned. What is your take on that? Like, what would you tell people who are struggling with this concept of self and existence? Because obviously that's a whole, if that could be answered, that would negate all these topics and discussions. But like, what have you found to comfort yourself?
Death. Now, it doesn't sound like death would be comforting, but once you make your peace with it, then you understand the shortness of life, the fragility of life, and the joy of just saying, I'm alive. I'm
Yeah.
really, really alive. But you can't do that unless you first made your peace with the fact that you will die, that everything that was you on this earth will be gone without a trace, that no one will remember that you were ever here at all. It's a hell of a thing to make your peace with, but if you can do it, you're free, you're liberated. Because I think a lot of what our culture values is driven by a fear of death. I need to be beautiful, and if I am, I'll
Absolutely.
never die. I need to be so super
Mm.
healthy that I'll never die. No, dude, you'll die, and you don't know when it might
Mm.
happen. But
I remember one of the things I reported on years ago was the leader of one of the anti-death cults in Scottsdale, the like aging, yeah, whatever it was called. The guy died, and that was a news story, and it was like, we're trying not to make fun of it, but the fact that you spend all this money and time, for an inevitable outcome,
So,
essentially.
yeah, that's the way to be comfortable with existing is to realize that in pretty short order, you won't exist. So,
Hmm.
what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What's that?
Yeah.
There's that old movie, Mel Gibson, and I think Linda Hunt played the character who said, "What then must we do?" I remember that as a kid, and it's always stuck with me. Okay, I'm alive today. I won't be alive forever, and maybe not even till the end of the day. This is the body I live in. These are my surroundings. These are my opportunities. What then must I do, Dan? What must I do?
Mm,
That's not the same as having a to-do list that you check out, but as a human being, what is my place in this world? What must I do?
yeah. And that brings me to your projects, because I think that reality and that concept of self and the comfort that you have found, you bring to all your projects, which I may be wrong, but I think is why you prefer the solo shows, where it's the solo stage show. Bill Oberst gets to be Bill Oberst, right? And there's no external forces pushing or pulling. And your latest one is Adversary, and that's a stage show. So tell us a little bit about that. I don't know if the human muscular system has anything to do with it in the background, but like, what is your process? How did you come up with it? And all the
It's
good stuff.
I'm fascinated by evil, what it is, because
Mm.
I play it all the time because of this face that I'm encased in, and so yeah, I got interested in the personification of evil in the figure of the devil, or Satan, or various names. You know, almost any religious tradition has some type of devil figure.
Was this tied to the compost discussion you and I had like 10 years
Yeah,
ago?
yeah, yeah. That's right. Yeah. So I've been interested in this for a
Oh
long
wow.
time. So I wanted to draw together various ways that people have seen this figure of the devil and just present them. So the show's called Adversary, and it's like Satan's greatest hits. It's some stuff from the
Wow.
New Testament, the Temptations with Jesus. It's a short story by Robert Louis Stevenson. It's a piece of Dostoevsky from the Brothers Karamazov, the Grand Inquisitor, and it's a piece I wrote myself. A little bit of John Milton's Paradise Lost. So it's like an overview of how people have seen Satan and how I see the figure of Satan. And I've designed it so that I hope that people can watch it who might take Satan literally, or people can say, oh, it's just a literary device. Either way,
Mm.
I think that there'll be interest in it. So I've been doing it at houses of worship and small theaters and really enjoying it.
So it's a touring show, but obviously in the LA area, I would imagine, right?
Oh yeah, I'll tour it wherever people bring it, but it's so small. You know, it's a very intimate piece, and so it's not going to play to 1,000 seat theater or anything like that. So it's hard to get it. It's kind of
Yeah,
word of
yeah.
mouth, but it's yeah, it's a passion project. I've worked a lot on it and put a lot of thought into it.
I think some of the smallest projects in the beginning are the ones that are the most impactful and grow to be the biggest,
And you
though.
know, here's something about left brain, right brain. Every time I mention this show, people say, "Oh, did you film it? Can I watch it?" And I'm like, no, it's a live show. But then but if you filmed it, more people could see it. No, they wouldn't see it. They would see a video
Mhm.
representation. But this is a live show. It's a different thing. Like all things are not
Yeah,
reducible to video. Everything doesn't
yeah.
transfer. Some things are just organic and they may have a very limited audience, and they're meant to have that limited audience because they're not made to be filmed and shown on a mass scale because it wouldn't come across. You know what I mean?
Right. It has a different effect. Actually, it's funny you say that, Bill. Yesterday, I was in my dentist's office, and I promise it's related to the concept. But I'm standing in the lobby. I'm not much of a sitter if I can avoid it. I see you standing and pacing, and so same thing, right? I'm just standing in the lobby looking around, and I see this picture on the wall of the dentist, his wife, and kids. And I think they had a dog in there in the middle of a forest, and it reminded me vaguely of when you and I were in like Griffith Park and we did that interview, and that sort of thing of like you go all this way out to find something that looks pretty and take this like snapshot in time, which is just a bunch of color ink from a printer, overlaid and mixed together, that people can then look at and draw their own conclusions of like, oh, this is a nice family or whatever. But totally loses the appeal, and I think that personal connection. because it's not how we were meant to interact with each other. I mean, this is the closest that we can get remotely,
That,
but that's because I think there's that two-way street.
that's it. We're not meant to interact this way, but it's the closest we can get. And as long as, like what you and I are doing now, as long as it encourages people to go the extra step and make the real connection, it's great. It's really
Yeah.
great, but it's not
Yep.
a substitute.
Yeah. So how can people find out about Adversary more if they want to look into this, or how can they get
Sure. Well, the
tickets?
website is adversaryshow.com. Adversaryshow.com. And that's got all the information. It's also got a Q&A that I did at the Ray Bradbury Center when I did it there. And we get into some discussion with the audience, which people may find interesting, which talks about the show and our collective feelings on evil.
Very cool. Well, Bill, is there anything one piece of advice you'd give your younger self or the audience watching who may have just found any of this
I
interesting?
wish I could call my younger self, Dan, and I wish I could say to that boy, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Because so many of my decisions back then were ruled by fear. What will people think? You know?
Hmm.
What will my parents
Yeah.
think? Or what? Don't be afraid. If you can just say, God put me here. I am who I am, and I know something of who I am, and I'm going to try to live that out in the world. I mean, I don't mean to be like in people's face and say, "Hey, you got to accept me," but just say, "I'm not going to have my life ruled by the choices that other people have made for me because they're afraid. I'm just going to
Yeah.
try being myself, and I may fall on my ass, but I'm going to try it." Yeah, don't be afraid. Interestingly, whenever angels appear to people in the Bible, that's the first thing they say is, "Don't be afraid." So yeah,
Interesting. There's a consistency cross culturally and religiously as well. You look at different religious texts, and there are common themes, and that's one of them. That recurring theme where you think about how siloed information was thousands of years ago, where you couldn't even talk to the next town over, but yet somehow this theme is consistent, and transverses the geography.
yeah. If you are trying to live yourself as you truly are, you'll be happier and you won't make other people unhappy. But when I see miserable, mean, cruel people, I always think you never made peace with yourself. And that's why you're giving the world such
Mm,
hell and you're making other people so miserable because you have never made peace with yourself.
wow. Well, Bill, thank you. This is definitely something that I needed. I'm sure many of the people watching needed as well, and it's always a pleasure. I know we said we'd keep it about this time because we both have things to do, but definitely I think a part two is in order with your next project because it's always a pleasure, talking and catching up and hearing your perspective on things.
I love talking with you. It's a gift, Dan. Thank you for what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks,
All
Bill.
right.
Appreciate it.